Our topic for today is a multifaceted approach to wellness and wholeness. So that's gonna go back on our theme of wellness and wholeness for this month, which we're basing off of 3 John verse 2. And so for this presentation, we're going to touch on 4 different areas when it comes to health and wellness. So one of the topics is going to be diabetes, and then kidney health, brain health, and also on sleep. Okay?
And we're going to do a multifaceted approach, like both in the medicinal side, which is where I kind of take over, and then like more non-traditional or like nutritional aspect, which Sister Paula will take over.
Okay, so I want to start first off. We're going to talk about the topic of diabetes. How many of you here, by show of hands, know somebody who has diabetes? Okay. Yeah, there's a lot of studies. There's one study from CDC that reports that 1 in 3 of adults here in America have pre-diabetes. So with knowledge, it is power. So by knowing all of these things, ways that we can support our health and prevent a lot of these conditions, that would be very beneficial, and that's what we're going to be doing today, empowering you with the knowledge that you need to know as far as regards to nutrition, health, and then also touching the bases on certain medications as well.
And if I were to ask someone to give me like their best idea or definition of what is diabetes, what would someone be able to say? Anybody? Anybody? No? No one knows what diabetes is? So someone said, I'll give you $1 million if you tell me what diabetes is. What would you say?
High blood sugar in your blood, glucose. Condition of glucose.
What was that?
Uncontrolled glucose.
Uncontrolled glucose. Okay. Anybody else? Anybody? Sister Jennifer?
It's when your body can't break down all the sugars that you're consuming, or the amount of sugars that you have in there is that your body can't produce enough enzymes to break it down.
There you go.
So would I get $1 million though?
That's right.
She just paid it all. She just paid it all. But Sister Jennifer was right. She said she mentioned an enzyme, and the name of the particular enzyme is insulin. Usually, there's 2 types of diabetes: type 1 and type 2. Basically, with type 1, your body doesn't produce insulin, and the issue with that is that if your body doesn't produce insulin, there's no way for it to break down sugars so that it can be used for like energy and other things. It's just gonna accumulate and accumulate and accumulate. And when that happens, you can have a lot of complications, such as like blindness, kidney failure, or even to the point where you might like lose your foot. So that's the worst case scenario. But treatment options for type 1 is only insulin. So there's different forms of insulin, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. And then there's type 2.
Yeah, so with type 2 diabetes, kind of like what Sister Melissa said, in regards to that, you're not sensitive to the insulin that is produced by your body. So as a result of that, you're gonna get an elevation of glucose levels in that case. So with type 2 diabetes, the major factor for that is usually with diet, and the person is usually diagnosed in adulthood, but it's something that is quite preventable through nutrition and dietary lifestyles.
And there's different types of screenings and tests that can be done in order to see how far along you are, as opposed to like pre-diabetes to diabetes. There's one test called your fasting glucose, which is being measured by there's fasting glucose, there's non-fasting, and what's known as the HbA1c. Fasting glucose, usually if your level is above or equal to 126, they usually say that you're diabetic, you have diabetes. For non-fasting, if it's greater than or equal to 200, then that's another factor. Because ultimately, you want your levels for non-fasting to be between 110 to 125. And you might say, what is non-fasting? It's kind of self-explanatory. It's like what your level is when you haven't been eating. So.
Well, yeah, for the fasting, right, ultimately we want to see that between 70 to 85, and for the fasting, 70 to 85, but for non-fasting, which is typically 2 hours after the meal, that's where you want it to be between the 110 and the 125. But a third test that's usually measured is called hemoglobin A1C. So with the hemoglobin A1C, I like this test because it's more comprehensive. It gives an in-depth look of how the body is controlling that glucose for the past 2 to 3 months. And it's not something that doctors would typically test for, because most of your doctors, they would test for just the fasting glucose in the major cases. And then some people, they may have a blood sugar monitor at home where they may test for their glucose levels, and that's where that non-fasting comes, where the 2 hours after the meal where you want to see it. So we don't want those numbers to exceed what the conventional medicine would consider. So if our numbers are exceeding that 70 to 85 for non-fasting, and if it exceeds more than 5% for our hemoglobin A1C, that's where we would also want to take action. The next test that's usually also tested for is fasting insulin. So insulin we talked about, which is secreted by the pancreas whenever you consume food. It's responsible for transporting that glucose from the bloodstream into the cells so that your cells can utilize that for energy. So we don't want there to be too much insulin in the bloodstream, because too much insulin, that can cause damage to the blood vessels. It can cause cardiovascular issues, and it can even affect the brain as well and the memory. So that's where we want the fasting insulin for optimal health to be less than 5.
Less than 5?
Yes, less than 5.
No, the fasting.
Insulin, fasting
not the fasting
insulin.
glucose.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain that? Goes to
Oh, sorry. Did you need me to repeat
The
anything?
difference
the difference between insulin and fasting that you're talking
The
about.
fasting insulin and the fasting glucose. I think that's what.
Oh, okay. So with the fasting glucose test, that's measuring the amount of glucose in the bloodstream. Okay? So insulin is the hormone that is secreted by the pancreas, which is responsible for transporting the glucose from the blood into the cells, and so that our cells can use that for energy. Because glucose is a source of energy. Our body needs it for functioning. Okay, so that's where glucose, you can think of that as the blood sugar. So with the fasting glucose, so that's for whenever you do a test, you fast for 8 to 10 hours, and then that's where you want that. We would ultimately, the glucose level for fasting should be between 70 to 85, okay? And then the insulin, which is that hormone responsible for transporting that sugar into the cells, we want that insulin marker to be less than 5 when fasting. Because when it's too much in the bloodstream, that just, it just shows that the pancreas is working too hard to secrete that extra insulin to control that blood sugar, which we don't want. We don't want our pancreas to be working too hard. So it just indicates if the level is too high, then we're not being sensitive to that insulin that the body is producing to ensure that we're getting that glucose cleared out of the bloodstream. Okay.
Now we're going to talk about different drugs that might be used, that's used for diabetes. There's about 5 different classes I'm going to talk about, and then one like key drug, metformin. Then there's a class called the sulfonylureas, another class called the meglitinides. There's something called the TZDs, the DP4 inhibitors, and injectable drugs. We had a PowerPoint, but for some reason we're having technical difficulties, but I'll go one by one. So the first one we're going to talk about is metformin. That's probably one of the most popularly used medications for diabetes. Hello?
Yes.
So metformin, yes. Metformin is one of the more commonly used medications for diabetes. The way it works is that it helps increase the sensitivity of the insulin, because remember, type 2 diabetes is when there's a problem with the sensitivity of the insulin, like the body's not like, the insulin isn't acting properly. So metformin helps to increase the insulin sensitivity, and also it helps to decrease the amount of glucose that's produced in the liver, so it helps increase the insulin sensitivity, and also helps make sure that there's not as much sugar in the blood. But that's why it's probably one of the more common medications used. A lot of times it can be used by itself, but you'll also see it a lot of times in combination with other medications. So one of the main things to look out for as far as side effects is just stomach issues. So sometimes you might have like nausea or upset stomach or diarrhea and things of that nature. So that's the main thing you need to worry about with one more slide? Okay, yeah. So again, like metformin is one of the more commonly used medications. The way it works is it helps increase insulin sensitivity and helps decrease the amount of glucose that your liver produces. So it helps make sure there's not as much sugar in your blood, and also helps the insulin work better, essentially. And again, side effects is just nausea and upset stomach. Next slide, please. Okay, next class of medications is the sulfonylureas. The most commonly used medications in this class is glyburide, glimepiride, and glipizide. And usually these can also be used in combination with metformin. I see this all the time, especially in the pharmacy that I work in, like that's used commonly, like in combination with metformin. And basically it helps the body produce more insulin, because with diabetes, it's like we want to make sure we have insulin working and we have as much insulin as possible. So side effects that you need to worry about. So the sulfonylureas, there's glyburide, glimepiride, and glipizide. They can be used alone or also in combination with metformin. The way they work is that they help increase the amount of insulin secreted in the body, which will help combat the sugar in the blood. And side effects, because it does this, of course, like it's gonna cause low blood sugar, but it's okay, because that's what we're trying to avoid. We don't want high, so that's what it will do. And then it does have the potential to cause weight gain. Nobody really likes that, but it's better to maybe gain a couple pounds and not have to worry about the complications of high blood sugar. Next slide, please. Next is the meglitinides. The two most common medications in this class is repaglinide and salaglinide. And basically it works similar to the sulfonylureas, in which it helps the body secrete more insulin. Sometimes this can be in combination with metformin, but not often. And it has the same side effects as the sulfonylureas, so it's very similar, but I think it's a little bit newer than the sulfonylureas. Next class, please. Next slide, please. The next one is the TZDs. The most commonly used one is pioglitazone, or its brand name, which is Actos. Usually it's available in both, but most commonly it's a generic form, but I just put the brand because sometimes people recognize that more. It just like with metformin, it helps the body, helps increase the sensitivity to insulin, because remember, diabetes type 2 is a problem with insulin sensitivity. So that's what a lot of these agents are going to usually do. They're either going to increase the sensitivity, or they might help increase the production of insulin, or they might help decrease the amount of glucose or sugar in the blood. Unfortunately, like, it's not one of the first line options because there's some major potential health risks, but so usually it's not a first line option. Side effects can include weight gain, headache, and muscle pain. And that muscle pain can lead to a complication, but we don't want to worry about it right now. The next class is the DPP-4 inhibitors. Common agents is Januvia, Onglyza, and Tradjenta. Those are the most commonly used drugs in this class. Again, like with the others, it helps produce insulin and helps decrease glucose, because when you have more insulin, usually in turn you should have lower glucose, which is what we want ideally for diabetics. Side effects can be joint pain, low blood sugar, potential kidney damage, and pancreatitis. So you have to be careful with that. That's usually when the older options like metformin or the sulfonylureas like glyburide aren't working. They might move on to these agents, these medications. Next slide, please. And then we have our injectable drugs, Byetta, Byrutin, and Victoza. These are all refrigerated. They help slow digestion and also helps lower sugar levels and also decreases your appetite, which can sometimes lead to weight loss, which is kind of a good benefit. So, side effects can include nausea and upset stomach. So those are the most commonly used injectable drugs. And when I say injectable, usually it's injected what's called subcutaneously, which is like near the abdomen or like under the fat, and that's where it helps the body absorb it quicker. So that's why they do it like that. And finally, it's just insulin. It's like I said earlier, it's the only option for type 1. They have they're sprinkled into different classes based on the duration of action. Some are super short, some are relatively short, intermediate, and long acting. Usually the long acting agents are the one that's used for type 2, like Lantus or Levemir. Those are the most commonly used ones. And insulin can be used either injected using a syringe. They have like injectable pens and sometimes even a pump. That's like one of the newer ways to do it, where you're actually like wearing the pump and then over time it like injects it like periodically throughout the day. So it's a little more expensive, but it helps like ease the burden of like remembering and things of that nature. And of course with insulin, the side effect is going to be low blood sugar. Next slide, please.
So now I'm going to go into the natural approaches for dealing with glucose management. First off, I want to start off with diet. So we want to limit the processed carbs. I know with me, coming from the Caribbean, I love rice and beans, and I've been recently introduced to jollof rice. So typically, we would consider like rice as our main meal. But when it comes to limiting the carbs, we want to ensure that we have it as more like a side dish. So when we have our plate, side dish. So in moderation, so when we have our plate, we want to fill it up more so with our vegetables and our lean protein, and just have a small amount of rice. So when I say a small amount, it could be like a cup of rice. Not a cup that you drink from, but more like the measuring cooking cup. So that's very important to help with managing our blood sugar, especially after eating, to promote that insulin sensitivity. And also limiting things like sugars, sweets, any packaged foods like cookies, for instance, breads, and then we talked about the rice and soda, and any of those fruit drinks. And also low glycemic fruits, consuming a lot of those is okay, but of course in moderation. So low glycemic fruits will include things like apples, pears, oranges, grapefruits for instance, even plums, and limiting some of those high glycemic fruits. So some high glycemic fruits do include things like bananas or even pineapples. It's okay to consume those, but them in moderation. So instead of eating like a whole banana, for instance, we can have like half a banana and maybe combining that with a source of protein such as nuts and seeds. Because when you do combine some of those high glycemic fruits with a source of protein, what that does is slows down the absorption of some of those carbs into your bloodstream, and that can help with regulating the blood sugar better. And another high glycemic fruit is something like pineapple, for instance, limiting that to maybe a few pieces. instead of maybe like a whole package that you can see like at the store, for instance. Just separating that out, not eating all of that all at once. And then another thing I want to touch on is healthy fats. Things like coconut oil, avocado oil, and olive oil. So those are really healthy fats. And I wanted to point out one oil that a lot of us may commonly use is canola oil or corn oil. So canola oil back in the days, it was okay, but because of the food industry and how things are nowadays, everything is highly processed. So the majority of canola oil out in the market right now is genetically modified, and they use a lot of bleaching agents, chemicals, and they do promote canola oil as heart healthy. As you can even see it, I've seen it even in stores where it says heart healthy, good for your heart, regulating blood pressure, but it's actually the opposite. Unless you get organic canola oil. So that's where education is key. So getting organic canola oil instead, or maybe switching it up to like something like avocado oil or coconut oil, because you can use these types of oils for high temperature cooking.
What about the mazola?
That is the corn oil.
That's the corn oil.
That's corn oil.
And that's what.
That's what you
Okay.
Yeah, and that's the one.
Because I buy mazola, you don't put canola.
Yeah, and that's the same thing. Yeah. So anything that says vegetable oil, canola oil, just avoid it unless it's organic.
Oh, how can we be trust them that they are going to put no organic? They can put genetics and put organic. They don't know.
Red palm oil is actually very good. There's a lot of good benefits. Yes, red palm oil is really good. I know that's used in a lot of Nigerian cooking. So red palm oil is actually beneficial. There's a lot of carotenoids. That's what gives it this rich red color. So it has a lot of nutrients that are actually beneficial for the eyes and even the heart. So the red palm oil, I would say, is very beneficial. So that's really good to cook with. Olive oil, yes. Olive oil is good.
But you have to be careful which one.
Yes, with olive oil, there's a lot of fake ones out there. So you want to be careful, and because a lot of them, what they do is they mix the olive oils with other oils like sunflower oil, and they sell it at a cheaper price. And to add the green color, what they would do is they would add in chlorophyll in. So anybody can make their own olive oil, to be honest, and sell it as olive oil. But that's where you want to get a really high quality olive oil, get extra virgin olive oil. It's a little pricier than your regular olive oils that you would see, but just ensure that it comes from California State. They provide really good high quality oil, and make sure it's in a dark glass bottle. Because if it's in a clear bottle, then it's not olive oil. Because olive oil is susceptible to damage from sunlight. So you want to make sure that it's in a dark glass, amber glass, not in a plastic. Okay. I think.
Yeah, like the Walmart or like Winn-Dixie brand probably isn't the authentic one. So.
And they say it. They say it on it too. They say 1% olive oil if you read it. They only put like 1% in it, and then the rest is whatever oil they added to it.
No, they have extra virgin on it.
No, they will say extra virgin.
Yeah, they will put extra virgin on it.
But if you read it, they will say extra virgin olive oil and some kind of oil. So that 1% is the extra virgin, and then the other one is 90.
The information I don't know,
Just
that
an
they have to be on
information.
that class.
The olive
So,
oil.
Mm.
When I went to Israel, they took us to where they did olive oil. The light one we see is only for the skin. That's what we were told over there. The one you see in the clear is 3 stages. The one you see in the dark green bottle, that is the one they said is for consumption. That is the first press. The second press is the one you can use for the body and a little bit for cooking. And the third one, which we all see in the store, is only for the skin. That's what we the education. That is we use for anointing. You use to oil your. That's the one we always buy in the
in this stuff.
in the store. We were told that's the education we were giving is for the skin.
Praise the Lord. Because of our time, we want to give them the time to praise the Lord. We want to give them the time to continue with the presentation. There will be question and answer time. If we don't finish today, we're going to give time for them to continue. Please take your notes if you have questions. Some of the things we have concerns about, take notes, write down your questions so that we can organize this in a good and timely manner. You have sermon notes. If you don't need extra, ask. Write down all your questions, your concerns, your comment. And once we're done, we'll take some of them today. If we don't finish today because of the time, we will definitely, it's a broad topic and they still have about 3 more to go. So please, praise the Lord.
Thank you. All right, so next I'm gonna talk about with exercise for regulating our blood sugar. So getting at least 30 minutes of exercise 5 times a week. It could be something light, it doesn't necessarily have to be heavy. It could be something simple as walking, even running, swimming. Resistance training, there's a lot of research with weightlifting where that helps to promote healthy insulin sensitivity. And for the next slide, I'm going to talk about supplementation. So when it comes to supplements, some things that can be beneficial are things like chromium. So chromium, it is a mineral, naturally occurring mineral. It helps to regulate blood sugar by helping to transport that glucose from the blood into our cells so that our cells can utilize that for energy. Also, cinnamon is a really good spice. We can also even use that even in our drinks. I use that in my smoothies as well. That helps with regulating blood sugar. Another nutrient is mulberry extract, which I have a picture here. It's from this plant here. It's the fruit. So with the mulberry extract, that helps to regulate your blood sugar even after your meals. So that's where that can be very beneficial. As well as the lipoic acid, that helps with promoting insulin sensitivity. And then the next nutrient is the sorghum bran, which you can see the picture there at the top. So with the sorghum bran, that also plays a similar effect as the mulberry in that it helps with regulating your blood sugar levels after eating.
Okay, and now we're going to talk about kidney health. And before we talk about actual kidney health, we're just going to quickly talk about what is the function of the kidney, what the kidney does. So if you go to the next slide, please. It helps regulate fluid balance, it helps regulate blood pressure, and it's also a filtration system to get rid of waste products in the blood. So you can see that it's very important that we have a healthy kidney.
So for the risk factors for kidney damage do include certain diseases. So we talked about the diabetes. So diabetes, what it does, it causes a process called glycation. I'm sure my fellow coworkers have heard that word a lot. So that's when you have excess sugar in the bloodstream. And as I mentioned earlier, that can cause damage to the blood vessel walls, including the kidneys as well. So that can affect the kidneys. Even blood pressure can also affect that. And certain medications such as NSAIDs, even diuretics, and even medications that are used for reflux, for reducing acid in the stomach, that can also affect the kidneys. Diet, so we talked about diet and nutrition, some saturated fats, so fried foods, that can affect the kidneys as well. And even age is another factor, being older than 60 years old. And then the last thing is family history.
Okay, and just with the medications, the reason why it's like with NSAIDs, the way they act is because they cut off blood flow to different vessels, including vessels into the kidney. And that's why when you take too many like ibuprofens or Advils or too much of Aleve, like over time, that can cause like damage to your kidney. Certain antibiotics, the problem is that they inadvertently attack the kidney, or they create too much abundance of waste, like the breakdown of the actual antibiotics becomes too much where the kidney can't filter out, or sometimes it forms like crystals and stones that can impact the kidney. So that's why we say medications can impact the kidneys. And then we can move on to the next slide. With signs and symptoms, it's kind of hard sometimes to understand when you have kidney damage because it can be masked by other things, but this is some things to look out for: nausea and vomiting, of course fatigue, loss of appetite, issues with sleep, shortness of breath, muscle pain, sweating, and high blood pressure. So that's some things to look out for. If these are like prolonged or they're lingering, then you should probably go get it checked out to see what's going on. Next slide, please.
Okay, so as far as with kidneys, there's some certain blood tests that we can do to go about to see if the kidneys are functioning well. So one of them is the creatinine, so that's going to measure as far as the byproduct and the waste that's within the kidneys and how the kidney is doing, like a job that they're doing in filtering that out. The next one is the BUN, so that's the blood urine nitrogen. And then also EGFR, which is looking at the filtration rate of the kidneys. And then those are blood tests, so the kidney function can also be done through a urinalysis where they do measure those similar markers as well. And another thing that can be done is the imaging test, so looking at it through an ultrasound just to see how well the kidney looks and to see if there's any changes as far as the structure and how the kidney is looking, especially if the tests themselves show some abnormality.
As far as treatment, usually what they do is try to treat the underlying issues, like how we talked about earlier with risk factors such as diabetes or high blood pressure. They'll give medications to kind of treat the underlying issue. And then I know with blood pressure, they usually try to give medications that are kidney protective, such as like lisinopril, losartan, valsartan. Those are usually like the first line treatments for people who have kidney issues or blood pressure. A lot of times you might have swelling, so they'll give you diuretics. I know one of the medications that could cause it is diuretics, but it's also, if you can decrease the swelling, that decreases the burden of the kidney, so that's why they'll prescribe some diuretics. If it's still not progressing well, then you would have to go into dialysis. That's where it's basically you're hooked up to a machine that kind of does the filtration process of the kidneys for you. And the worst case scenario, if that doesn't work, then you might be a candidate for a kidney transplant. And then they'll give you certain medications that will help make sure the body doesn't reject the new kidney. So that the body doesn't reject the kidney, so that way the new kidney can work.
So as far as some supplements that can be very beneficial for the kidneys, my number one top suggestion is CoQ10. So CoQ10, I think coenzyme Q10. So it is a coenzyme. It functions a lot of things. It does a lot of things in the body. I think that everybody should really be on CoQ10 because all of our bodies do, all of the organs in our body is in need of CoQ10, and one of them is the kidneys. So the way it works is that it supports the function of the mitochondria. The mitochondria, what that is, it is an organelle inside of our cells. We can think of it as the power generator. It's the same as a power generator in your house. It provides that electricity in order for you to be able to see and everything. So with that mitochondria, there's an abundance of that within our organs, including our kidneys. So if that mitochondria is not functioning well, that can affect how well that certain organ is working. So that's where the CoQ10 comes in. It works as a coenzyme to help with manufacturing that energy that the mitochondria needs for it to function properly and also for that tissue or that organ. With kidney conditions, that's one of the things that's typically depleted as well. And also certain medications can deplete CoQ10, so that's something that would be very beneficial to supplement with. And then the next nutrient is milk thistle. which is an herb. It does work as a detoxifier. It helps with detoxifying the kidneys and also the liver as well. And then pyridoxal 5-phosphate, which is a form of vitamin B6. So it has a lot of research in regards to protecting the kidneys, helping to protect the kidneys from even protein loss, urine from protein loss as well through the urine. So that's where the kidney, the vitamin B6 is very protective of the kidneys, and also regulating blood sugar. Because the B6, it helps to regulate the blood sugar, and that's where it has a protective effect for protecting the kidneys from any of that damage from extra glucose in the bloodstream. And then the next nutrient is vitamin D. So vitamin D, we typically get that from the sun, but a lot of us in the real world, we're not really out in the sun as much. And a lot of us, especially from being African descent, we are typically prone to be deficient in vitamin D, and vitamin D is very important for our overall health and even for kidney function as well. So that's where something I would suggest that everyone should supplement with, getting at least 5,000 to even 8,000 IUs of vitamin D3 daily, and also following up with blood testing to see where you are as far as your blood levels, and to ensure that the blood levels are between 50 to 80 nanograms per milliliter. Okay.
Which one is actually?
Milk thistle.
Oh, this one is the milk thistle over here with the plant and the flower.
Okay. How do we get that?
It comes as something.
It comes in a supplement and a capsule form.
No.
And then next I wanted to review the DASH diet. So with the DASH diet, what that consists of is eating similar to what we were talking about, the low carbs, your lean proteins, high vegetables, limiting the sodium in the diet as well. So that would help to regulate blood pressure, which is also beneficial for kidney health.
And DASH is just an abbreviation for a dietary approach to stop hypertension. Because again, hypertension is one of the risk factors for kidney damage or kidney issues. So if we can improve our blood pressure, we can improve our kidney health.
Right. And also another thing I wanted to include is water intake, ensuring that we're consuming a lot of water a day. I know Sister a day, she always mentions that she drinks like a whole
3.5 liters.
liters of water in the morning.
No, daily.
Oh, daily. Okay. Well, so that's where we want to drink at least 8 to 10 glasses of water, 8-ounce glasses of water per day. And if we're physically active, consuming more water, even 12 glasses of water may be beneficial, because that's helpful for also the kidneys, helping to filter out some of those waste products and the function of the kidneys.
Okay, so next we're going to talk about brain health, more specifically memory, because we know like it's something, memory loss is something that we're probably going to deal with as we get older, something that we can't really ultimately avoid, but there's approaches that we can do to help with our mental health, our brain health rather. And if it gets to the point where we do need medications for memory, there's like about 3 or 4 that's most popularly used. Next slide, please. And they all work similarly. They work by increasing the production of a certain enzyme that helps promote memory and just learn behavior and just learning. So because it kind of helps like keep the brain active, because when the brain is active, and that kind of helps slow the deterioration process. So the most commonly used memory drugs are Aricept, Exelon, Razidine, and Namenda. Sorry, next slide, please. I'm sorry. They all work the same, and they usually have the similar side effects, which can be nausea or vomiting, loss of appetite, diarrhea, and then sometimes with Namenda you can get a headache. They can be available as tablets, both regular tablets that you have to swallow, and then there's also with the Aricept, they have tablets in which you can put on the tongue and it can just dissolve. Because I know sometimes these medications are used more for like older people, and like a lot of times older people have issues swallowing pill, or they don't even like to take medication sometimes, so they might try to like spit it out. So giving them a medication which can just easily dissolve in the tongue is easy. Also with the Exelon, it's also available as a patch, which kind of helps with compliance, because then you don't have to worry about them spitting out a tablet if they just put it on a patch, and then it just releases over throughout the body periodically throughout the day. So that's how that works. And now we're going to talk about some ways to help with memory.
Well, as far as with ways to help with memory, first off is diet and nutrition, which I'm going to discuss later. And then next would be brain exercises. So that would include like things like crossword puzzles or even reading, any stimulating activity for the mind. There's a lot of research where when you're stimulating the brain, that does help with supporting the cognitive effects, and it actually helps with supporting those pathways that our neurons and those nerve cells can communicate with each other, and also preserving that memory. Also some supplements, which I'm gonna discuss in the next few slides. Exercise, physical activity that also helps with supporting brain health as well, helps regulating our blood sugar like I mentioned earlier. So by regulating the blood sugar, that can also help with supporting our brain health. And also there's a lot of research where exercise actually stimulates those growth factors for those nerve cells. So again, that's going to help to promote that communication with those neurons.
Also, there's an app called Lumosity. Lumosity is an app that helps you with your brain memory and your speed of your brain. So it's like a free app where you can use to do brain exercises. I force my mom to do that every day.
Tell me about that.
And also sleep is the last thing. So with sleep, that's the time when our brains repair, heal, and recharge itself. So if we're not getting enough sleep, that can actually reduce the brain volume, and it also can cause damage to some of those nerve cells as well, and those neurons, and as a result affect our memory over a long term. So next slide. So when it comes to diet and nutrition, first thing first, those foods that are rich in omega-3s, so that would include any of your seafood, any of your fish, those are a rich source of omega-3s, nuts and seeds, avocados for instance, because omega-3 fatty acids, they're a major component of our brain cells, and that's something that is very important to support that fluidity of the cell membrane, helping to promote that those brain cells as far as their function. Eating foods that are high in vegetables, our nuts and seeds, which I mentioned, and also limiting red meats and those saturated fats. Okay, so saturated fats, any of the fried foods, of course, and then also those oils that I mentioned earlier. Consuming green tea. Green tea has a lot of rich antioxidants and nutrients that actually help with promoting brain health as well. Extra virgin olive oil, which we discussed, since it has a good ratio of those omega-3s as well. Okay, and then as far as supplements, so if you're somebody who doesn't consume a lot of fish, or some people, they don't like to eat fish, that's where taking a fish oil supplement would be very beneficial. So the breakdown of those fatty acids would be 1,400 milligrams of EPA and 1,000 milligrams of DHA, getting that daily. Also, blueberries is very beneficial as well. They're high in antioxidant properties. Consuming blueberries or even getting that as a supplement, because with the supplement, you're going to be getting a richer source of some of those polyphenols, which will be very protective for the brain. And a lot of research where blueberries themselves help with promoting healthy glucose management and protecting those brain cells from any damage that may occur, and even helping with targeting inflammation within the brain as well. The next nutrient would be the phosphatidylserine. So phosphatidylserine is actually considered as a brain nutrient, and it's something that is commonly, it's actually naturally found in our brain cells, but the levels of it tend to decline with age, and that's where memory can be affected. It's also responsible for creating a neurotransmitter, which is a chemical in our brain called acetylcholine. So acetylcholine helps with regulating memory, cognition, sleep as well. So that's where supplementing with phosphatidylserine may be very beneficial to promote those healthy levels of that neurotransmitter. And then my last supplement that I want to touch on is magnesium, which we may all be familiar with. Magnesium has some calming effects on the brain, and it also helps with, it crosses the blood-brain barrier and helps with that synaptic density, which is within those brains. And that synaptic density, you can think of it as a roadway or a pathway. So with it being thicker and more dense, that's where it can allow more communication, that transmission that could that would be allowed for those neurotransmitters to function and help with supporting recall and memory.
Okay, we're now to our last topic. Woo. Sleep. This is something that I know a lot of us don't get enough of, probably. It's something that's very beneficial, something that we cherish every hour, minute, second we can get.
That's right.
And before we talk about medications that help us, we're going to talk about some risk factors. So next slide, please. Again, we're going back to diabetes. Just it's terrible, and it just does a lot of things. And also another risk factor can be caffeine. Of course, caffeine is because it's a stimulant. It's going to keep you up. So, and I know we love our coffees, we love our energy drinks, but if we do it too much, then it can affect our ability to sleep because like we crave it so much. Stress, of course, because like when we're stressed about life, about President Trump, about the coworker we hate, about whatever, that's the stuff that keeps us up at night at times. Hormone imbalance, because there's certain hormones, especially melatonin, I believe is what's used for regulation of sleep, but a lot of times if there's a hormone imbalance, we might have more of like serotonin or other things that can keep us up as opposed to the melatonin that will help mellow us out and sleep better. And then sleep apnea, because that's usually you're having an interruption of sleep because you have momentary moments where you're not breathing. And of course, if you're not breathing, that's not good, and it's going to keep you up. So those are the difference. Those are a couple of the risk factors. Some of the more common medications used for sleep is Ambien. I have so many customers that I deal with Ambien, but Lunesta, Restoril, and Z-Quil, which is just diphenhydramine. Diphenhydramine is in NyQuil, Z-Quil, Unisom, everything, but it's Benadryl. It's because it causes drowsiness. It's an antihistamine that helps promote drowsiness, which can help you sleep. So. Melatonin, we're going to get to that. We're going to get to that. Some of the side effects with the medications is just, of course, because these help with sleep, is going to be drowsiness. It does cognitive impairment because when you're drowsy, you're not necessarily like thinking correctly. So it's highly recommended don't try to drive or operate heavy machinery or anything while you're on these. Impaired motor skills, so again, don't drive when you're taking any of these medications. With Lunesta, sometimes it can cause dry mouth, so just be aware. Try to stay as hydrated as possible. And with Ambien, it can cause like weird dreams or involuntary like behavior sometimes, like sleepwalking or sleep actions. And so you have to be very careful because there's a lot of times there's been stories of people who take Ambien and then they don't realize that they might have be asleep and they end up making like $1,000 credit card purchase or something, or they do like something wild. So just to something out of the ordinary. So there's something to be on the lookout for with Ambien. And now we're going to talk about some approaches, some natural approaches to aid in sleep. Next slide.
Okay. So as far as some natural approaches that we can go about is eliminating or decreasing some of that caffeine intake. So if you're somebody who tends to drink coffee, that's typically fine, but if it's affecting your sleep, we don't want to consume that caffeine at least after 12 p.m. So that can help us to regulate our sleep better. Okay, and then another thing is that relaxation methods, things like meditation, yoga, and even prayer. So that can be very beneficial, you know. And then chamomile tea. So chamomile tea has some relaxing effects on our body. Yeah. And sleep hygiene. So so sleep hygiene, what that is changing our behavior or environment so that can make it help us to have a more sound sleep. So one of the things we can do is changing the lighting in our room to make it darker, because when the room is dark, that stimulates the production of melatonin, which helps with promoting that sleep. And also another thing is that the blue light filter. How many of you, by the show of hands, use a blue light filter on your phone? No? A blue light filter. Yes.
It's on your phone.
It's on your phone. It's like it's a night mode for your phone. I think we have an Apple expert for those.
So yes. So there is an app it comes automatically on the phone. There is a setting on the phone where you can turn on the blue light filter. I personally have it set up as a timer that it automatically comes on after sunset, so at 7 p.m. and it comes back on around 7 a.m. Because the blue light filter, what it does, it suppresses the production of melatonin in the brain. So if you're using your phone at night before bed, so that's where there's some correlation where that can affect your sleep. So by using that blue light filter, you can come to me after if you want me to show you where you can get that blue light filter turned on. Okay, and then also avoid eating heavy at least 2 hours before bed because that can cause some indigestion. So if you're having some indigestion, of course, that can interfere with sleep as well. And then also, I know it's very difficult, but getting at least 6 to 8 hours of sleep, if possible, that's very beneficial. We talked about how that helps the brain, helping with recharging our brain and helping with that renewal process for the brain as well. And we talked about hormonal balance. So with hormonal balance, especially as we go older, there's an imbalance with progesterone and estrogen in women and also testosterone and estrogen in men. So if there's an off balance between those hormones, that can affect our sleep. Progesterone in women has a calming effect. It helps with regulating our sleep as well. So if the levels are low and is not balanced with estrogen, and then in men, testosterone, if the testosterone is low, that can also affect the sleep. We talked about sleep apnea, how that affects oxygen utilization because you wake up in the middle of the night, and one of the symptoms is also snoring. So if somebody is snoring a lot, maybe if there's anyone you may know, and if they're gasping for air, and they still feel tired during the day, even if they get as much sleep as they can, that's where getting a sleep study would be very beneficial. So that would entail like going to a doctor's office, and they would monitor you throughout the night and hook you up to different machines and just regulate how you're sleeping and also measure some of those oxygen levels. And the way for treatment of that is with a CPAP machine. And so with the CPAP machine, that would help with the breathing and also help the person sleep better. And as far as some supplements that can be beneficial, we talked about melatonin, so that's the sleep hormone. So if melatonin levels tend to decline with age as well, so some individuals may need melatonin to help with regulating their sleep. Ashwagandha, that's an adaptogenic herb, so that means that it helps you to have a healthy response to stress. So if somebody is going through a lot of stress, that's where ashwagandha may be very beneficial. The third nutrient is milk peptides, which comes from milk. Milk does have some calming effects. It actually works on a chemical neurotransmitter called GABA. So that's where that can promote relaxation as well. And another nutrient that I like is lemon balm. That also promotes healthy relaxation and a calming effect on the body. And valerian root does the same thing.
That concludes our presentation. So now, if anyone has any questions, feel free.
So praise the Lord. We're gonna give room to 2 questions for now because our time is far spent. And I know we all enjoy this and we have a lot more to learn. So we will do a part 2 to accommodate questions last Sunday of the month. So you guys get ready. I won't be here next week. And for as many that we know will benefit, please bring people because these are things that you don't hear from your conventional doctors. And what we're trying to convey here to help the community as much as we can is to teach people to think outside the box. Don't just stick with what the doctor tells you because some of these things, even the conventional doctor, they either disagree or don't know, but because of their, I'll say, a little ignorance. But people are suffering and wasting away just solely doing conventional treatment. And whereas we have all things God has created for us that we can take from and use. So please, please, and please, we will do more of this. If you need us to take an extra day to do it, we will do, to educate ourselves to be able to better our lives and empower us and empower the community out there. So please, 2 questions, give us 5 minutes, and if anything, please write down what you have today, and of course, we're always here. Praise the Lord. First question.
Praise the Lord. I want to bless God, thank Him for the seed planted here. Praise the Lord. Now, when it comes to snoring, I want to hear more about it and then what I need to do, because everybody snores. But the level of snoring is what makes the difference. So, how do we avoid that? What do I use? What do I need to use?
They have like different mouth guards, because a lot of times usually the snoring is because like there's like a blockage of the passageway for breathing. So it's like your body's like defense mechanism to try to combat the lack of airway, or so they have like different mouth guards or that you can put in that you can wear at night that will kind of just help facilitate an opening, so that way you won't be making the snoring mechanism to as a result of like trying to get more air. Also, I know sometimes elevating the head of the pillow can help promote like a cleaner passageway, which will in turn decrease the snoring.
And also laying on your side may be better instead of laying on your back.
Second question. My second question is one question. Okay.
We'll put you there.
Sister Bola. Oh, no, I just wanted to ask about the name of
Your
the
baby.
medication. Oh,
Medication for what?
for the flooring.
No, it's
No,
not.
it's
God.
Well, it's more of a mouth guard. Mhm.
Thank you. She wear that.
Does anyone else have a question? Okay, go ahead.
Praise the Lord. Okay, the second question is, in case of, let me put it this way. Asthma, what has that got to do with your breathing, snoring, and then what else? Sleeping. Yeah, because now I know part of the reason why I sleep more in the day than in the night. But now it's like to sleep at night, maybe like 3-4 hours, I'm up again. So, is sleeping during the day an offense or not? Is it harmful? Because my sleep during the day, once it is like around 11, 12, that's when I want to sleep. And then the rest of the evening, I stay up.
Yeah, well, sleeping during the day is not an issue, but of course, if you're sleeping a lot during the day, that's going to affect you being able to fall asleep in the evening. So naps are fine. So you mentioned that it's hard for you to sleep at night. So what I would suggest doing is trying to sleep more at night. And if you're not able to because of snoring or waking up in the middle of the night, maybe doing the things that we mentioned, sleeping on your side or using the mouth guard. If that could help you with your breathing possibility and help you to sleep better throughout the night. Because of course we don't want your sleep to be broken up. It's better to sleep for more continuous, because that's when your body repairs itself. And then you asked about the asthma and snoring. So those are two different things. Asthma is more of like a condition that affects your breathing and the lungs. There's many different contributing factors as far as with asthma. It could be the immune system being overreactive to certain things in the environment. Allergies can also cause asthma. So that's where being on a certain medication like inhalators to help with the breathing when it comes to asthma. But usually with asthma, that's diagnosed as in childhood. So it's something that is commonly diagnosed in childhood and not much more so as you get older as adults.
I had a question regarding jollof rice. So we know that it's not. We know that rice. You mentioned rice is a carbohydrate that is not the healthiest for us. Is there like a substitute that we can have that we can make, like quinoa, for example?
Yeah.
Like quinoa with jollof rice. Can you speak on that?
Moderation. It's in moderation.
Everything's in moderation.
I mean,
Portion control is moderation.
everything's in. Everything is good, like within moderation and also portion control. It's more portion control than even moderation.
We eat
like,
mountain.
I cannot eat it as
Mountain,
Well-
my God.
Like with portion
Gotta eat
control,
it in the
more
morning,
like
afternoon.
measuring it out, like 1 cup of rice is fine. Other alternatives are quinoa, like you mentioned, because it's a higher protein.
Cauliflower rice.
There's also cauliflower rice. They have that in the frozen section at Publix.
You can
even
do
at
it yourself.
Aldi's. So Couscous is also good. Brown rice is another good alternative. Brown rice is better than white rice because with brown rice it's higher in fiber and also protein, and it's digested differently than white rice, and it has less amount of carbs. So those are other alternatives.
And with the brown rice, I mean, you can try to do the jollof rice the same way. It's just cooking. It might not taste the same, but it still might be a benefit. I know, like my cousin who's like a health freak. He said he cooks his jollof rice with brown rice. So I don't know how much he likes it, but it can be done. So that's an alternative.
Praise the Lord.
Praise the Lord. Did we gain something? And even if you knew about some of these things, this is more like a refresher.